um, I ended up majoring in filmmaking. I studied things like philosophy and music, but a really great music professor there, who was coming towards the close to his retirement when I was there in the late '80s and early '90s. Was also, in addition to being a really amazing music professor, he was also kind of a pioneer in the like good food movement. There's actually a good thing that people say in France. We don't have a great equivalent of it. They say éducation populaire, like um, like education for the masses about food and gastronomy. And the idea was he was a person who spent quite a bit of time in Europe in the after the Second World War, and especially in Italy, and really came to appreciate how in that very poor country after the Second World War, how one of the amazing things because of Italian culture that was accessible to everybody was you could have a life of luxury at the table. Thanks to the culture of especially with particularly with Italian cuisine of making amazingly delicious things with very, very simple and very inexpensive ingredients. And so, to make a long story short, actually amazingly in the '70s, he was a person. He tried to. It didn't work, but he tried to get Antioch to be the first university in the world to offer bachelor's degrees in food, and you could have gotten bachelor's of arts in studying politics of food, or a BFA in basically in cooking, or a science degree in like organic farming. This was in 1979. He was going to have Alice Waters was going to come and teach there, and it was quite an amazing thing. Unfortunately, the faculty supported it, but the administration at the time thought it was too out there, something like that, so it didn't go through. But anyway, kind of inadvertently, he was teaching music, I was studying film, but he taught a wine class because he was a kind of a big wine expert. And so a lot of us illegally, because we weren't 21 yet, illegally at that time took this wine class from him. And and I thought that was really interesting. And it wasn't my I've always ended up working in wine, but it hasn't been my biggest passion. But one thing it really instilled in me from I don't know if you'll know, Antioch College is kind of a it's not a small Midwestern kind of progressive college with a great history. It was started by abolitionists in the 19th century. Coretta Scott King was a student there. It has a kind of a nice tradition of progressive education. And so I learned about food from this context of wanting to make it democratic, basically. And so that's just something that was kind of instilled in me from my learning there. And then when I discovered through a person who I see is present on this Zoom from David Ram, who's now living in Virginia, but he was living in Brooklyn and was a member of the Park Slope Food Co-op. I went to visit him, and he took me to his he said his amazing kind of co-op, and I really saw that was a place that more than any other place I'd ever seen was really doing that work of making high quality food more accessible, because there are a lot of educational programs that exist in the world, and they're really good, but if you really want people to, if you want to transform, which was, for example, this professor, John Runsheim, transform the way that people eat, you really have to deal with the terrible problem of money. And unfortunately, organic and good food and stuff like that, it's associated with money and lifestyles and that kind of stuff. And to me, that was kind of the amazing thing that Park Slope did, or one of the amazing things, is they solved that problem. Food is really inexpensive at that store. So yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, Larissa, did you have a question?
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was really cool to see this inside. My brother-in-law has been a member for about 20 years, so but I've had him get stuff for me there, but never actually been inside of it. But what you mentioned, that it was, or they talked about it being owned by the members
Mm-hmm.
own business. Well, what kind of business structure is it really?
Okay. Let me say another quick thing is that so when I discovered Park Slope through David, I said, wow, one, because I'm a filmmaker, I said, wow, this is an amazing, documentary subject. But I also thought, I was living in Paris already. I thought I want to shop at a place like this. So another thing that I've done is I'm one of the founders of, we've started a supermarket, identical supermarket in Paris called La Louve, which is translated as the She-Wolf, kind of an ugly name in English, but kind of a nice name in French. And so that's kind of a thriving thing. And so we have a similar business structure. So it's basically, if I remember correctly with Park Slope, because I'm so used to what we do in France, it's what do they call it? A not non-stock corporation. Is that something that exists? I forget all of my, and so people, in order to shop there, you have to invest. You become literally a shareholder of the cooperative. And that's something that I've discovered through getting interested in all this kind of stuff. This is kind of a long and amazing tradition of consumer cooperatives. This whole idea started with a lot of people, but especially with Robert Owen at the beginning of the 19th century, and who had his little experiment in kind of a paternalist factory that he made that really worked very well. But that inspired a whole movement that still kind of exists in some parts of Europe, of consumer co-ops. Just this simple idea of, in the beginning of that, it was all these consumer co-op movements started in working class neighborhoods, working class industrial neighborhoods in Europe, basically in the 1840s, and at that time, I mean, it was poverty like we can imagine from movies and stuff like that. It was not a great life being an industrial worker at the beginning of the 19th century. And one of the big problems was food, and there were not supermarkets at that time, but the enemy often were the little shopkeeper. If you've ever read Germinal by Zola, there's a good example of kind of an unscrupulous shopkeeper who comes to a tragic end. And so the idea was, how can we protect ourselves, basically, from, what kind of things happened? The prices they were gouged with the prices, the scales were rigged. They would mix plaster into the flour to, dilute it, just all this kind of stuff, just to make money, And so this simple solution that eventually worked was, instead of somebody else being the owner of the place that we buy food, let's try to invent a structure where we are the owners of the place that we buy food. And that spawned a whole movement that was extremely, and still is in some ways, extremely powerful. I mean, I'm thinking of making another film, and it will be the memory of how powerful that movement was. In the First World War in France, the cooperative movement was so big and so powerful that the French government called on the cooperative movement to do food distribution in all of France, because there was no other structure that was capable of doing it as efficiently. It was an amazing, and still, if people know, like in Italy, there's, you shop at Coop Italia, they do have a 13 billion euros of sales per year. And that's a different structure in the sense that people are not required to work to become members, but the owners of those co-ops are the members. It's basically, they're not-for-profit, member-owned supermarkets. So the structure is, in a simple way, is there are no dividends, but you're a shareholder, and you become the company owner, and that gives you control of how you eat. I think you're on mute. Yeah.
When they review some of the people's jobs, whether it's scheduling or the disciplinary person, right? It's like you're stealing from yourself and one another.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
an interesting thing here in France. Our co-op is doing really well. We've got 5,000 members here in France, and we did about 7.5 million euros in sales last year. And when the fraud and hygiene inspectors, they come in a pair in France, and when they came to visit our co-op, this fraud inspector said very openly, he said, I don't think that my job applies here, because what I have to show, in catching fraud with stores, again, catching people who rig rig scales and stuff like that. He says, what I need to prove is the intention to commit fraud. And he says that doesn't make sense here, because the people who are working here, most of them are the consumers. And so they would be committing fraud against themselves, which doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
We have a question from Allison. Allison said that was fantastic. Thanks, Tom. Curious to hear your thoughts about CSAs. Do you see them as competitors or friends with a shared mission?
Oh, friends with a shared mission. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there are tons of CSAs, that said, I mean, there's tons of CSAs, in Park Slope, that are thriving like crazy, and also in Paris. There are limits. For me, the great thing about CSAs is that it's a great solution for a certain kind of farmer, a certain kind of really, really small farmer. It gives them a great way to survive at that level. I don't think, and this is in a completely unsentimental way, I don't think that sometimes in France, people where there are CSAs kind of happened a little bit after it happened in the States, that big wave, and it's kind of declined a little bit. I think in France, I could be wrong about that. But one thing about it is that actually if you try to think of a CS, one thing I really liked about Park Slope, and I like about the cooperative movement in supermarkets, is that it's not something that's designed to be a complement to existing food systems. It's designed to replace them entirely, which is to replace basically capitalist food system. And one problem with CSAs, if you're trying to think on a level of we'd like to transform the whole world into a better structure, there are many ways that a CSAs would be a better structure, but one way that they're not, and this could maybe be solved if they happen at a big scale, is through transportation of the food. Actually, the way that CSAs, at least in France, exist now, it's actually one of the least efficient food transportation networks, in the sense that you have individual farmers driving things in a truck that's probably not full to a few people, and then that truck is returning to their farm empty. And when you have the food distribution system that's built up around supermarkets, cooperative or otherwise, if a truck moves, it's filled with products. And so anyway, that's kind of an interesting thing. But in the mindset, it's definitely a lot of people who are co-founders of the co-op here with me in Paris were members of CSAs. Though one thing that's interesting is a lot of times once they join the Louvre, they do drop their CSAs for price reasons, sometimes. But I know I met people at Park Slope, for example, that participated. They were members of Park Slope Food Co-op, and they also participated in a CSA, probably especially because they like the contact with the farmer.
Mark and Debbie Cantor have a history with the Park Slope Food Co-op. Love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Roberta. Tom, thank you for that. I feel like the movie kind of captured a moment in time for us. And what was interesting about it is how, I'll get a little bit talk about our experience, but how much has changed since we were members, but also how much has not changed since we were members. We before we moved to Ridgewood, we lived in Park Slope. So we were members from, I want to say 83 or 84 to 97 when we moved to Ridgewood. And so it's obviously changed a lot since then. When we started, it was about 1,500 members. When we left, maybe 3,000, something like that. And when we first started, we didn't have any children yet, but we decided we didn't want to work during shopping hours. So we wanted to work after shopping hours. And the only thing available was Sunday nights. And we joined something that was called the ordering committee. So what would happen is the inventory committee, after the co-op closed, would count what was left, and then we'd have to look at the purchasing patterns and the selling patterns of the last few weeks and figure out what to order. None of us had any background in that, but they gave it to us, so we did it. But the best part of that job was we also became the taste testers for new food. So if somebody had a product that they wanted to get into the co-op somehow, we were the first line of defense, and we had to do this.
And there were only about 8 of us.
Right. Right. So we basically decided the fate of 2,000 people in terms of a product that got in or not, based on how good it tasted. But one of the highlights for me in the movie, believe it or not, was the interview with Joe Holtz, because he was like one of the originals, one of the first, I think the first 3 employees that they ever had, Joe, Linda, and Mike. And I don't know exactly when that was filmed, but he's still as irascible in your film as he was back when we were members. So we really appreciated the fact that we could kind of take a trip down memory lane, because a lot of it is the same. The stuff that people were talking about then is stuff that we felt then. Yes, it's bigger. There's now 3 times the size, and there's also a lot of technology that we didn't have back then. But the spirit is the same as when we were members. So we really appreciate getting to see that. So thank you very much.
That's great.
It's very interesting to hear.
Tom, you mentioned in an interview that people talk about the vibe in the store, and you were saying something along the line of, it's not a different vibe, it's a natural vibe, and how the main meeting place, right, in society for thousands of years was, you know, the marketplace and all of these gathering places, and we're just losing that now. And I think of especially this year with everyone ordering groceries online and being obviously isolated, but even before that, what are we losing by not having those gathering places?
Yeah, that's a thing. So I'm kind of the spokesperson for our co-op here in Paris, and so I'm well rehearsed in these kind of saying that kind of stuff. But it's one big thing that I discovered is that we were a little worried here in Paris when we were starting it, because ours is we're the second co-op of the Park Slope model, the La Louve. You know what I mean? There's lots of people have tried to do the Park Slope model, but it's really hard to pull off, in fact. And so, you know, Park Slope was started in '73. Our co-op opened in 2016. So between that time, none of the other projects worked. And we were worried for all kinds of reasons of like, wow, you know, how's it going to work? And one thing we were worried about is, can we get the same ambiance of like kind of the cooperative ambiance, you know, or whatever? And that was the easiest thing to do, we discovered, because you know, and so this is the thing I say a lot of times in different interviews and stuff like that is what you're citing there, Roberta, is this. We don't think about this, but like historically speaking, the marketplace is the #1 social archetype. It's where people arranged marriages. It's where, you know, all of this kind of stuff happened. And I certainly never thought about growing up of like, oh, you know, because with my parents, we shopped at regular junky supermarkets. And that whole social network, because most people, 80% of people in France shop at supermarkets, that whole social network has been lost. It's just gone. You know, the joke is to test it is you say, hey, you call up your friends and you say, what do you say we meet at Kroger this weekend and spend the day there? You know what I mean? I mean, it's a joke to say something like that. And but people at Park Slope, people at our co-op in France, they hang around. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's hard to get them to leave. And I think that's it is kind of a natural human thing around the selling and buying of food, is you want to be social in a certain sort of way. And the way that is, and so that it is true, and people who've been members of Park Slope, one thing that definitely members of the Louvre, is once you start shopping for a few months at a co-op like ours, and then you're obliged, like here because of the COVID in France, sometimes during certain lockdown periods, people were not allowed to come that far to come to and they said that the worst part about it was having to shop at a regular supermarket, because because you discover that is the natural way to do it. And what basically, very concretely, it's like the one woman talks about in the film, the experience once you get used to that kind of natural, I really do think a natural way of distributing food, going into other supermarkets, they seem like just craven idiots who are trying to sell you things at all costs. It's the marketing, you know what I mean? It's just it's like you want to avert your eyes because it's so aggressive and vulgar, and that whole spirit is there of we forget it, but we repress it. I mean, you know, capitalist supermarkets, the point of those businesses is money. I mean, the medium is the means is food. And but the point is money, and that's the huge difference historically with consumer co-ops. Is they change that. The goal of what Park Slope does and the goal of what we do is providing good food. Money is the means. We have to break even. You know what I mean? That's the ambiance that people thrive in, because it's a human one. We've just so much swallowed this thing of like, obviously I'm walking into a place where somebody's trying to make money off of me, and I'll just deal with it. And I think that's what's really refreshing for people, is to walk into a place and say, oh, this is great. You know, to be in a place where it's just, yeah, the best price possible on the best thing that we can have, you know.
And there's no marketing, right? There's no, I mean, nothing in this,
No.
there's no sales, no marketing,
Well,
Facebook, right? No need for it, right?
no, well, I mean, that's, I laugh because the funny thing is, I hate marketing practically more than anything else in the world, because it is just professional lying is what it is. And the thing that is amazing is the more we did no marketing for our project La Louve, zero. We did interviews with magazines and radio. That's the only thing that we did, but we were just factual. And we really have a very, even in our what we call orientation meetings, where people come and check out to see what the co-op's about, we're really kind of not nice in a certain sort of way. We're like, we're not like this. We don't want people who don't want to be there to be there. You know what I mean? And so we do the opposite of what you're supposed to do in marketing. We really tell what it is, and we say, we don't only have organic food. So if you're looking for a place that's only going to have organic food, get out of here. You know what I mean? Or you're not going to be happy here. And so, but the paradoxical thing, because obviously everybody's looking for that consciously or unconsciously, is the less we try to seduce people to come into our project here in France, the more people want to come.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's, and I mean, it's amazing here. I mean, the fact that we've done zero advertising, we've done zero marketing. And not only do we have, even during the coronavirus, 20 or 30 new people who join our co-op a week. How do they hear about us? We don't know, We also, there's about 70 different projects that have heard about us without the least, attempt on our part to seduce people to who want to do the same thing. There's projects in Berlin, in Madrid, projects. They're not, thriving. They're not profitable yet. There's one in Brussels that is profitable and working in Montpellier, you know what I mean? And so that, what I say often about this thing is like, we don't have to do marketing because the idea is good. You know what I mean?
There was that one part in the film where somebody who wanted to shop at the co-op and wasn't a member was kind of accusing the Park Slope of being exclusive. And I wonder if you have that at yours in Paris as well, where if you're not a member making that commitment, if you don't understand the model.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too, I mean, we do, in both our co-ops, we do everything we can to make sure that if you want, I mean, you do have to work, and there's probably a certain, there are people in certain social conditions where it would not be possible, unfortunately, you know what I mean? People who are in extremely precarious social, I'm thinking in here, there's lots of undocumented workers that are coming from Syria and from, Africa here that are living on the street or halfway on the, those people are not going to have it's exclusive in a certain sort of way that they're not going to have the resources to join probably, and also maybe not the certain that are people that are working all the time are not going to have the time or energy to put into working 3 hours a month because they have their survival to count on. But otherwise, I mean, you can, if you get any kind of welfare benefits at both of our co-ops, it's 10 euros to join, which is reimbursed if you ever leave the co-op. So if you can come up with 10 euros, I mean, for us too, I mean, you just have to ask. If you don't even have 10 euros, somebody will give you 10 euros. But the thing is, you have to play the game, and you have to be willing to do the work. And that's the thing. So I don't think it's exclusive. No.
Let's see, another question. Ellen, did you have a question? Yes. Just on.
It's a comment, really. I'm a current member of the Park Slope Co-op, and I just joined it recently. So I'm in an unusual situation. I'm of the generation that lived in co-op, communal housing in the early 70s and all of that sort of thing. But I'm a new member of the co-op, and I thought your film really captured the essence of it and what I love about it. But I want to say it's now over 17,000 members, and it's a small space, and it's really maxed out in terms of people are standing around and chatting in the very narrow aisles. They're actually a problem, and it can be even unpleasant. Where I get that sense of communality in my membership is in the work shift, which I adore.
Absolutely.
I adore. It's such a diverse population, age, race, gender identity, every kind of mental illness, Hasidic Jews, race maniacs. I mean, they're all in there, and they're all working with you. And there's a real ethic of decency towards each other that is an incredible pleasure and rare to come by these days. So I really found it. I'm a walker, I enjoyed sort of, a lot of the walkers are big guys, we walk even it's raining at 10 o'clock at night. I like being a 75-year-old, 5 foot tall lady walking car home. But it's okay. I mean, people are very, the diversity is just a pleasure.
But what are some of the jobs that you do on your shifts? Like on your shifts, what are some of the jobs that you do?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
What are some of the jobs that you do on your shifts?
Oh, well, what I do recently, well, there hasn't been any membership labor the last year. They closed it because of COVID. They just reopening it now. But for about a year and a half, I've been a walker. That's been my job, regular shift. I've done, I don't have the skills, the cash register skills, but I've done all the other main floor jobs. I don't know if you noticed one of the scenes, there was a woman standing on a little stool directing people to which cashier was open, sort of a line manager, they call it. I've done the in gate and the out gate, checking your receipt to see that you paid. I haven't done the downstairs jobs much, the packing or, I kind of protect myself from the carrying and that sort of thing. But it's a very accepting community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very seduced by that as well.
Yeah. Weird in some ways. I mean, eccentric. It's a magnet for eccentrics, but it's lovely.
And Tom, in some of the scenes, I mean, your subjects speak all the way through, but in Frederick Wiseman's documentary style, where he just goes on for hours, like just observing and letting the camera just roll. And there were a few moments where I just thought that, like the one worker who was cleaning up at the end, like singing with the Zamboni, the floor cleaning, and all of those moments, and that long composting segment, like you just let it roll out, and you just kind of like, that's the whole point, right? No one is trying to use machines that are going to make this go faster. It's just right. And then that couple has time to talk and be with one another during the month when they don't have that in their normal lives. So I just love the fact that it's so long, so many of these processes and jobs and scheduling, all of that, it takes so long, right? An
interesting thing, and that's one thing that I did try to, because one thing, and that's, thank you for talking about the filmmaking a little bit, because that's one thing that we don't talk about in this. But just an interesting story. The guy who shot it, his name is Greg Harriet. It was really well shot film. If you don't maybe even notice it, but it was really well done, really beautifully shot. But Greg is he's like, well, I think now he's in his 30s, but he was like in his 20s when he shot the film. Really young guy, but he's an Emmy award-winning cinematographer. Ooh, and so he's he's good. He shot on, not in touch with American TV, but he shot some well-known on TV like nature documentary, traveling. I mean, the coolest job for a 26-year-old possible, you know, traveling around the world, shooting nature documentary. And he has a really good eye. But when the first day of shooting with him, we were down in the food prep room where they cut the cheese and all that kind of stuff, and we're trying to show what's going on. And I see him like kneel down and get on the floor, and he's obviously doing some super cool looking angle and all that kind of stuff. And I said, that's absolutely what we don't want in this thing, because this is for this subject. Maybe for another subject it would be okay, but this is we need to express the co-op through the language of the film. And one of that things is going to be very direct in this way, is it's just going to be, it's like I'm looking at you like I'm standing, like, you know, standing there looking at you like I'm a co-op member, not showing the fancy angles and doing all that kind of stuff, just kind of, you know, just kind of austere in a certain sort of way. And also you notice there's no music, there's no voiceover. That for me, that's personally, that's documentary filmmaking. I mean, you can do things in other ways and they can be interesting, but the making a documentary is discovering the place as you make it. And sometimes documentaries that are have too much to rely on music and voiceover, those are documentaries that have been too much planned in advance, and then going out and shooting them is just picking up the shots in a certain sort of way. And so really a lot of that unwinding that you noticed, that was definitely done on purpose to try to parallel and give the feeling of what the experience of the co-op is like. So thanks for talking about filmmaking.
Rebecca, and then Sally, and okay. Rebecca, you had a question?
Yep, Tom, that was such a great film. Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. Just really curious, the woman who it took 2 hours to get home with all of her groceries, was that planned, or did you or the cinematographer say, hey, let's, you know, follow you home, just randomly off the cuff?
So when I came to New York in 2009, because I was trying to start the co-op here in Paris, and I made a short little reportage on the co-op, and I ran across her when I made that little reportage, and she kind of explained to me her situation, that she lived far away, that she, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I just noted her name down, and then when I came back in 2013, many years later, I got a hold of her and did it on purpose to show that aspect of it, of how and did you so, who's the good New Yorkers who knows where does she live?
Upper West, maybe?
Upper West, yeah.
It was like the punchline when we get to her building. I was so exhausted with that.
It's on Riverside Drive that she lives up there. So yeah, and that's kind of a surprising thing too, is because even people like in France, like there's like, is she homeless? Is she, you know what I mean? All this kind of stuff, and then kind of like the opposite of homeless, actually.
Oh yeah, and can she afford a car? Right, Kathy, I was thinking of that too.
she's a lovely person. She was really it was really a pleasure spending time with her.
And then her giant paintings. Oh
yeah.
Sally, yes.
This is Marshall.
Marshall, you're next.
How did you shoot the scene where you're following the cyclist home?
That was my excellent young cinematographer who got on a bicycle, held the camera like that, and just shot it. And he did a really great job. I mean, we cut out the part that was too, you know, parts that were way too bumpy and everything like that. But no, but it was quite impressive. Yeah.
Question: Are there some things that you really miss in Paris that you were able to get at the co-op in Brooklyn, and vice versa?
Well, I was never a member of the co-op in Brooklyn. I discovered it through David and Nicole after I had already moved here. I lived in Manhattan for a while in the 90s, but I'd never heard of the co-op. You know, and so I mean, we've got a lot of the same kind of stuff. I mean, in a way, you know, that France has a culture that is really, really dedicated to food, more than America does. I say objectively, having lived in both of those. I mean, just in the sense of like, it's one of the most important things in the culture is sitting around a table and talking with people and eating.
Yeah.
And so we have really great food here at the Co-op, and in a certain sort of way, the conditions are maybe why so many people are interested. The question people ask all the time in France is, they're like, why is there one? Why is there one of those in just one in America? Where we started the Louvre, and we'll see how many of them actually work, but there are something like 30 different cities that are interested in trying to make a co-op like that instantly. And one reason is because, it's kind of a really pragmatic thing. They're like, wow, I can now eat the best version of Conte, of a certain kind of cheese. I can have, our wines, wines that sell for 13 euros, 13.50 in a wine shop, we sell for 7 euros. You know what I mean? That kind of, it's just the same kind of stuff as Park Slope, and kind of in a like wily, selfish almost way. French people are like, I'm getting on that ticket, that I'm definitely going to find a way to make it so that I am eating, that's the amazing thing. I work at the Co-op here as a full-time job. I make 2,300 euros per month. Which is not a ton of money when you live in Paris. My wife makes about the same, and we eat what we want to. We eat like we had every bit of money that we wanted to, and that's because of the Co-op. So I've never a member there, but the food at the Park Slope Food Co-op is amazing as well. So
how is it with working with the staff, the members in France, like in terms of work ethic and interpersonal? Is it fairly similar, or is it feel different?
It's good. I'll say that. I think it's a little bit different. We met Park Slope when they were big, and so they've got 80 employees, and now we have 12. And so there's a little bit more of a just stopped being like that. But up until our like 9th employee, we all felt like founders of the Co-op. And so it was a little bit of a different relationship. Basically what it means is that we were willing to work all the time, for no money in a certain sort of way. It's like, it's kind of like, as we say, it's like a startup that doesn't belong to us. And now with our most recent employees, it's a little bit different. They feel like they're just employee, really dedicated employees. And so at Park Slope, I think that they've got a lot of people for whom it's a really good job, but it's not something that was their life mission for a while or something like that. And the majority of our staff, that was the case. So I think that changes the dynamic. Though what we do keep one thing that's Park Slope has a really, all things considered in the world, egalitarian pay structure with it. They have basically 2 or 3 tiers of pay. And I've always converted into euros, so I don't know, I forget what it is actually in dollars and yearly instead of monthly, but there's the people that they call coordinators. That's the majority of people, 70 or so people. Then they have general coordinators that are kind of the management that work more, very concretely. And so the coordinators make the equivalent of 4,500 euros per month. You can do the math there. And then the general coordinators make about 7,500 per month. And so, that's a big difference in pay, but it's not like in a corporate, we all know this kind of stuff. It's not like 100 to 1 difference. At the Louvre, for the moment, because we all are kind of in this spirit of being founders and all that kind of stuff, we all make the same thing. If one person gets a raise, everybody gets a raise. And I remember Joe, who we talked to Joe and Ann for literally for 7 years, once a week, to help start our Co-op here. And I remember Joe talking about he does exit interviews with employees there, and he asks them about this pay scale of like, there's no seniority in a certain sort of way. You can be working there a long time, and the brand new employee gets the same amount of pay as you. The seniority at Park Slope comes through vacation. You get more vacation days or whatever. But he asked people when they left, what do you think of that equal pay kind of stuff. And he said only one person out of I don't know if it's 100, but dozens of people, only one person wasn't crazy about it. And the reason that people do like it is it gets rid of stupid, petty jealousies.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's you all are making the same money, it's just like, forget it. And so we don't have to think about that. We don't have to sleep with somebody to get, in order to play those dumb games or whatever.
Right. It's amazing. We have to ask what's next. Are you working on any projects now, or are you too busy? Film projects, that is.
Well, like I said, I am too busy because we still are, there's still our co-op here is going to work, but there's still a few things that need to happen, I think, to get it on its feet. The one, I don't know if there are any people who are in this conversation who've lived in France or anything like that, but the one thing that we've been really great about, though it's still, we just got to make, there are a couple of things in French contemporary, just like mentality, culture, that are a little bit different for a project like this. One thing I discovered, which I never would have thought before leaving America, is actually Americans are pretty organized. You know what I mean? Are pretty pragmatic. As we really do have a pretty, I don't consider myself too pragmatic, and definitely the person that I co-founded it with, another American, Brian, I'm not a very pragmatic person at all. But relatively speaking, we don't have basically this idea that like you discover how to make something by trying to make it. That's the thing that we all kind of know how to do in America, because that's what we do. We try it and we see if it works. French people, because of their terrible, excellent in some ways, but terrible in other ways, school systems, there's this real complex about making mistakes, right? The worst thing that you can do is making a mistake in public and it's your fault. And so that prevents people from trying things, because if it doesn't work, then it's their fault. But of course, when you make a project, a million things don't work, and you just say, well, that's how we discovered that it didn't work. But then the other thing is that there's a little bit of a culture here of what they call chaleur, and that's the verb that they use for babies, chal, which is to say when they go like the pictures at the end of the film when they're like, oh, I get, I mean, there's a case just happening right now at our co-op of like somebody who was at a cash register who was a member who was running the cash register wasn't super friendly to a person at the, whatever. And so there's a big thing on Facebook of like, that person wasn't very nice. It's just like, blah, blah, blah. And so there are certain things that we want to get into place, or just setting the tone a little bit to kind of say, stop that, just stop it. You know what I mean? Like don't. It's kind of like what I forget what the woman's name is who's a member was telling us about with doing a walker and stuff, being a walker and all that kind of stuff. But one thing I wanted to say in response to what you said, one thing that's super, super interesting is that yes, the social part does come through the work in this project. And one thing that is just very interesting is both in our co-op and at the Park Slope co-op, at Park Slope, they have something that's called the Fun Committee, right? They organize, like events, and, they do that nice, kids talent show, and it's really a great thing and all that kind of stuff. But relatively speaking, for having 17,000 people, or they have film nights and stuff like that at Park Slope. And, it'll be something like this. There'll be like 30 or 40 people that come out of 17,000, you know what I mean? And just the thing, and we have a conviviality committee, and we get 15 people that come, and that's great that they come, but the real secret is the conviviality comes through the work. Yeah. And the kind of the lesson is like, the problem with conviviality committees is there's too much pressure to be convivial, right? You show up and you're like, here we are, who's going to be convivial first? Here, let's go. And but when you're sitting around a table cutting cheese, you've got this stupid, it's like doing a mass mailing, it's like you've got this stupid little task to do and that takes all the pressure off. And so then people naturally start talking to each other. That's the important thing in this model is that the work it's not fake. We really need people to do that stuff. If they don't cut the cheese, the people don't have the cheese to buy. So we're counting on you. And it's not a decorative thing, it's an excuse for you to be social. And because of that reason, the social part really works. And so just to answer in a long-winded way, I want to just I want to keep, I'll always be working in some way for the Louvre because it's a big project in my life. But I would like to make another film, and I would like to make a film about this amazing history that everybody, even in Europe, also has forgotten at how powerful and how amazing the cooperative movement was until the 1980s. They used to hire, just in France, the little Association of Consumer Cooperatives had 50 scientists that they employed that studied every food that came into their, analyzed it. They were the first to, one of the first to point out the dangers of hormones in beef and, all that really this thing of like, that's what it should be. We came up with a thing that we say here. And this is perfect for Roberta. This is that we want to take as our model public libraries, actually. You know what I mean? A food co-op should be the public library of food. We are there to do that in exactly the same spirit, which is we are interested in people getting together. We are interested in it being open to everybody, but we're also interested in being the defender of the thing that happens. The education comes through that. My fantasy project, which has not happened, and I'm counting on David, who's in the audience here, to help me with this one day, is that the consumer co-op movement in Europe. I'm disappointed with slow food. I'll just say that very publicly, in the sense that a lot of the people who started it were great. Their ideals are great and all that kind of stuff. But we met with them one time, and boy, did they look down on our supermarket. The people who were kind of at slow food headquarters, because it's like, oh, it's a supermarket. You know what I mean? I'm like, look, not everybody's a lawyer who lives in Tuscany, who drives around to buy the most beautiful mushrooms in the world. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. And so I think that would be amazing if one step that the European and American cooperative movement is, we should be the absolute elite and avant-garde in terms of food taste. You know what I mean? And get that power again to do that. And then the goal is, how can we make this available to everybody? A little bit because of all the things that the cooperative movement has suffered because of the competition from capitalist supermarkets in the last 30 years or something like that. They're just struggling to survive being a supermarket, and they've lost a lot of them this thing of like, we're the defenders of I don't even like the word consumer, but just of people. You know what I mean? We are the food superheroes, the good guys that are there trying to find out what is the pleasure, not that what's the, in terms of safety and health, but also what's the pleasure and that would achieve, as this teacher of mine from Antioch, this great person, this thing of where you have something that you have the highest quality thing, and it's really genuinely available to everybody, and everybody really has the ability to perceive it. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of thing. So with this, I would like to make another film that reminds people, the film that you guys just saw, that is the reason that film, that was shown in 50,000 people came to that film in theaters. You know what I mean? And that is the reason, that film is the reason that a lot of these new projects are existing. And so I'd like to try to make another film that's funnier, that's crazy, totally crazy, that explains this amazing thing that we've almost lost, this cooperative movement. You know what I mean? It's it was, just sorry that I'm going on, it's late, but like in France, the major economist who was in the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, who was the proponent of the cooperative, especially consumer cooperative movement, was a guy named Charles Gide, and he's the uncle of André Gide. And I think the uncle that made André Gide kind of the way he was, which is to say the severe Protestant, like whatever, who made André Gide this kind of libertarian kind of whatever. But anyway, but he had this dream you know, because in France, they talk about France is la République, you know what I mean? It's the, you know, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Those are the ideals, which you know, those are very beautiful ideals that I really do believe in. And his thing was, what we're going to make is la République coopérative. And you start, and they almost did it in the sense that, like, it starts, and this all started at the beginning of the 19th century. It starts, you become a member of your co-op. Your co-op becomes powerful, like Park Slope is powerful. They make 50 million in sales. And that, when I tell people who know about supermarkets, what their square footage is, and in French, in people here in France, and how much money they generate every year, they think I'm making a mistake in French with my numbers, because they say it's not possible. We're powerful already in France, our co-op. So the idea was, you get a bunch of these co-ops that are powerful, and then, you know, it's like a monopoly. And so, and then, which is what this movement did in the 19th century, then you take over distribution, because we're just retailers. And then the people who sell to us, we make that a cooperative. So that every time you're making a financial transaction, it's not at the same time something that is taking money from people, from the middle class, and giving it to people who don't need more money. Basically, you take that element out of it. And then what they did in the cooperative movement, you know, in the 20th century, then you move in, once you have distribution, you move into production. You know, in the beginning of the 20th century in England, you could buy cooperative raincoats, cooperative bicycles, cooperative jam made by co-ops, you know, that pay good wages, that, you know, all this stuff. And the part that they never got to was that then you buy land, and the land belongs to you at the supermarket. Wow. You know what I mean? And so that's the next film I want to make, is to talk about that inspiring idea.
That is fast. That could almost be like a series. That's such a huge story.
Yeah.
I mean, would that be something that, even this film, like I would watch 6 episodes of this, you know, for those people, I would be all over that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a series, but yeah, it'll be, but that's it. So what's your next project, Roberta? Tell us about what's the next film?
This is all year round. We're just, well, the next one I'm showing the Linda Ronstadt documentary. So that's just going to be, it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. May 4th, I think everyone else sent out reminders, but yeah, this has been just an amazing experience. We show documentaries all the way through the year, and have filmmakers come, or sometimes people who are featured in the documentary. And it's just it's amazing to be in a room and, you know, just talking with people who are passionate about the topic. So it's been online, of course, this past year. And I'm just so grateful that we've been able to have this experience and have you zoom in from France. You know, we've had a lot of speakers from Africa and a couple from Europe, really from all over this year. So, you know, this is the one silver lining with this awful time, is that we have been able to have people like you directly. So, so I just want to thank you so much, Tom. This was amazing. And your passion is just so evident, and your intelligence, and such incredible ideas for the future. We will be following for sure.
Well, let me thank you for a second, Roberta, because you actually, and this is different than most people host these, you really did your homework and stuff like that. Most people don't do that. Thanks for asking about the filmmaking. Thanks for doing research on the film and stuff like that, because you would be surprised. People don't do that, actually. People organize all kinds of film festivals, and then they don't know that much. They, you know, just the bylines and stuff like that. So thank you for, I'm very pleased to participate in such a high quality event. Thank you very much.
I felt like I've spent the week with you. I've been watching all the interviews, and it's just fascinating. I implore all of you to do the same. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks again to our friends and our board president for coming tonight, and all of you. I just loved hearing your stories and your input. It's an amazing topic, and we really look forward to seeing what you have coming up next.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night, everybody.
Good night.
See you later. Bye-bye.